Blog Talk Radio.
Hello everybody, this is PeterJoseph and welcome to the April 20th, 2011 Zeitgeist Movement Global Radio Show. We do this broadcast every week and we have rotating lecturers and coordinators from all Zeitgeist Movement chapters coming in to help with this. This is our new platform to give more voices to our movement and of course different angles and perspectives. And also to show that this movement is a leaderless movement. It's about people working together. It's not about anyone imposing their interests on anyone else and overshadowing them. Which leads me to a very important update, which I've had to displace Federico, unfortunately, who is supposed to be doing this particular talk this Wednesday. And he'll be back next week, though, to continue that. But due to recent events with the Venus Project, it's important that I speak, of course, about these issues, which I think many listening to this broadcast are probably already aware of, unless it's archived. And that's the fact that the Venus Project has decided to disband, to disassociate themselves from the Zeitgeist movement for a number of reasons, interesting reasons, which I'm going to go through in a little while. But I think the best approach to this is for me to give kind of a historical view of how all of this came to be, so the proper context is put together here. The first thing I'd like to begin with is a little treatment on myself. I don't particularly like to talk about myself. I have, throughout time, since the beginning of the Zeitgeist phenomenon, tried to restrict my exposure, and it's not for any secretive reasons. It was simply from the standpoint of I don't like being the forefront of anything. It's not in my character and my upbringing for that type of role. I'm a very introverted, but we all grow and adapt, and I, as a musician, I isolated myself in music rooms in a highly narcissistic way for years and years. I moved to New York. I began to work in advertising because getting music jobs is very difficult in New York City, especially for someone aspiring to be a solo classical marimbist, which was my particular interest. And got out of that conservatory due to debt reasons and decided to, well, not decided, I was forced into these kind of base careers that I don't particularly care for, but I did excel at. Before Zeitgeist 1 came out, I was in the upper 10 percentile as far as income. I easily could go back to making $100,000 to $200,000 a year with horrible advertising jobs or my work previously in the stock market, which I don't talk about very frequently because I'm not particularly proud of it, but then again I'm not particularly ashamed of it either. It's all a matter of what we all have to do in an economic system to survive. As a catharsis in 2007, I decided to make literally a thrown-together art piece that was shown in Lower Manhattan called Zeitgeist. It was thrown up on the internet after it was over with no interest for any progress of it. I was simply resorting back to my normal life, and it became very popular. And it sort of took a life of its own. And suddenly the question became, what do we do about many of these social issues that were brought up in Zeitgeist? What do we do about a world that is very unstable, about a lot of things that I won't go into if you're familiar with that work? And I started to look around with this newfound sort of pressure because of this new audience that, to my sort of discomfort, was paying attention to me, which is why originally I was Peter J, and then suddenly became PeterJoseph, and now I've stuck with that because that's what I became known as, even though that isn't my last name. I scoured around, and William Gazecki, who liked my first film, sent me a DVD called Future by Design, the biography of Jacques Fresco. I watched it. I was very impressed by it. I contacted them through Gazecki. I went to visit and did an interview with Jacques, read his book, and was just astounded at how incredible this man was and what his ideas were and how effective and important they would be if we could just create a system that was able to put them into practice. Then was born Zeitgeist Addendum after these interviews. And Zeitgeist Addendum, I won't go into the explanation of it. Essentially, though, it sparked this experiment, which was the Zeitgeist movement. Now, a lot of people ask, why wasn't the Zeitgeist movement the Venus Project movement? From a standpoint of strategy in this experiment, I knew the millions of people that were interested in this sort of Zeitgeist phenomenon, which took on a life of its own. So to call it the Venus Project movement, because it's an organization that wasn't known at all, coming out of the Zeitgeist film series seemed obtuse to me. And it wasn't that there was an overriding issue. It wasn't that there was ever an issue to override anything that the Venus Project was interested in. It was simply a matter of strategy, and it was also an experiment, too. I wasn't sure what would come from it. But amazingly enough, just a number of months later in New York City, we had our first official Zeitgeist Day. There actually was one in 2008 early in the year, but that wasn't related to anything except just the movie. And I just sent out tons of free DVDs to people if they wanted to show it in their communities. That was the original Zeitgeist Day, but I don't consider that really to be an effective one because it didn't have a particular purpose. It was just more expression for awareness without necessarily a goal. And that was the beauty of the Venus Project, is there was a goal. And in New York, we sold out this huge arena of 1,000 people. It was covered by the New York Times. Incredible to me that at this short period of time, such interest was driven to this, and it was incredibly hopeful. And I was really happy to see Jacques and Roxanne get the attention that they deserved with this advent. And after Zeitgeist Addendum was all about working on the movement, and we culminated coordination. We got chapters. We currently have roughly 1,000 to 1,100 chapters across the world. Roughly 500,000 people, though I think there's more than that because we only track people that come to our global site. We've had Zeitgeist Day now for 3 years in a row, official Zeitgeist Days. All of them in the West have sold out venues, almost all of them. And it's incredible what's been happening as a global institution. And across this entire point, the Venus Project and Jacques Fresco were always put on the pedestal. That's what the Zeitgeist movement was. Now, when I met Jacques, and I'm going to digress a second, he really turned me around in many, many, many important ways that I'm deeply accredited to him, deeply accredit to him, and thankful for him. And one of those was the fact that in my time, I was obsessed with people. Oh, there's all these groups that are doing bad things. We got to shut down Monsanto. We got to shut down the Federal Reserve. We have to shut down these institutions. And Jacques pointed out the very real reality that it's not the people, it's the system. The people are products of this environment. We can argue genetics all day, but the specifics are really easy to see when the reinforcing attributes of our social system are taken into account. And the people are just like trees. If they flourish in a very rich environment with good light and it's healthy, then they do well and it's a balanced organism. If they flourish in poor soil with bad shadowing, with bad environmental effects, a very wilted tree might emerge, or a distorted tree, or an unhealthy organism. And there really is no difference between a human being and a tree on that basic, fundamental symbiotic level. And this was an astounding realization to me because I had a lot of things wrong in my sense of activism. He also taught me that knowledge is serially developed. Serially developed. He introduced me to the Newton quote, that I can paraphrase because I don't have it in front of me, that I have done what I've done because I've stood on the shoulders of giants, building upon information. Did Newton invent gravity? Or did he discover it through a rigorous process of scientific analysis that had been set in motion by many others long before him? He also taught me that the lowest common denominator of any particular phenomenon is where you have to go. You have to get to the point of origin, if you will. You have to move past the signatures, the signposts, all the symptoms, all the manifestations of things, and get to the closest to the core of anything that you possibly can. Root causes, for example. So if you want to defend against crime, you don't just keep throwing people in prison because that doesn't do anything. You have to get to the root cause of why they're motivated to do the crime to begin with, etc. Many, many wonderful things that people around the world that visit Jacques continue to learn about, and it's extremely important information. But let it be known, based on the prior comment, that Jacques isn't necessarily the originator of anything. And one of the greatest things he told me as well is that, I'm a manifestation of this. Now, he is the inventor of the Venus Project, if you will, the inventor of a concept of a resource-based economy. You could say that. But in his own rhetoric, he knows that no one really invents anything, which I find fascinating, because if he was willing to recognize that this culmination of ideas is serial, I'm not quite sure why, and this will lead to my discussion of their objections to the Zeitgeist movement, why they've chosen to kind of shut down any third-party relationships, or at least their relationship with the Zeitgeist movement, considering that the Zeitgeist movement has done nothing but promote everything that Jacques talked about. There's no direction in the Zeitgeist movement. The direction of the Zeitgeist movement is simply to orient people and to get them focused in a particular direction for social change. And I think we've done a very good job of that. And I apologize if I'm jumping around a bit. I'll organize myself a little bit more in a second. But I want to talk about now, given this historical context, what the Zeitgeist movement has actually done. As I mentioned, over 1,000 chapters across the world, amazingly successful global simultaneous event days, very positive news coverage, growing awareness of this. The very fact that any mainstream media has taken the time to consider the idea of a moneyless economy is incredible to me, because most reactions would be just to laugh at you. And it's slowly coming into the cultural zeitgeist, if you will, these possibilities that many probably have never thought about before. We have the Zeitgeist Media Festival coming up, which was an extension of the Z-Day event, which I want to plug, of course. The dates for this is between September 9th and the 11th, basically the weekend of the 9th to the 11th. And that's where we want to get this unfolding. We're going to be doing it on the Sunday in Los Angeles. There's a lot of celebrity interest. The point of this event is to make it popular, make it stylistic, to want to not be so self-centered. We're coming out of a severe distortion in human development where, if you go back to the 90s, everyone's talking about bling and the value of money and the value of materialism, as though these attributes really contribute to quality of life. A sad byproduct, obviously, of the monetary system and its need for constant consumption and perpetuation and advertising, but I won't go on that. And we need to get a new world going where people actually identify with helping each other as opposed to trying taking and screwing each other over. A world where people find it rewarding to give, not receive. And that's what the Zeitgeist Media Project in its manifestation, which will occur globally just like Z-Day, is going to hopefully try and accomplish. And all it takes is a few celebrities to come forward with this. And it could be quite amazing, the effect, and it could grow substantially. Now, I've sidetracked a bit, but the reason I bring that up is because what the point of the movement is, and this brings me to the criticisms of the Venus Project. The point of the movement is simply to spread information. And my role has been simply to assist in how that information is spread, and nothing more. In a meeting that took place on Monday, April the 18th, Roxanne Meadows came into a TeamSpeak meeting with us. Many coordinators, or many people there, naturally, they were concerned about the issue. And this is where she announced that there was going to be a disbanding of the two organizations. And there was no conversation about this. And everyone, of course, asked the reason for this. And one reason that was brought up was that it's Peter's direction, evidently, and not Jacques', which took me back to think, what direction are they actually referring to? At no point is there anything in our materials that has been objectionable to them who have read everything.